Hello, it's Lexi at Cozy Tea Cafe, and today we're going to be summarizing The Serpent and the Wolf by Rebecca Robinson. Book 1 in the Dark Inheritance Trilogy, and Book 2 is coming out on February 24th. So just as a reminder, these videos are full of spoilers. I'm going to be going through in-depth plot points from start to finish in this book. So if you don't want spoilers, don't continue watching. So we start off with Vasilisa Khazar marrying Reed, the Wolf of Moray, in an arrangement made by her brother Dominic, who is the emperor of the nation of Asteria, after their parents died suddenly. Vasa has a mysterious dark curse growing within her that presents as a black mist, and she doesn't want to be used as a pawn in her brother's schemes, so she plans to kill her new husband, start a war, and then escape. She seduces Reed and ties him up to kill him, but decides to spare him because he showed her kindness in the little time that she's known him. Instead, she leaves him there tied up and escapes to Dara, the city of scholars, to learn more about her curse. 3 months after fleeing, Vasa has been posing as a student at the Library of Una. Out of the 6 major cities in Icaria, the 4 westernmost cities, including Dara, have largely remained a secret from other nations. Vasa is reading a passage on Viraji, the goddess of witchcraft, and her lover Sitar, god of language and writings, when she sees a paragraph about a void of black mist. Vasa recalls her mother dying from the same cursed black mist, like she was drained of life from the inside out, and Vasa thinks of the curse as a serpent within her. Vasa makes her way to the lecture hall, and the foreman of Dara is introduced, as well as the foreman of Moray, which is Reed. Vasa sits through the lecture to avoid suspicion, then goes back to the library to retrieve that book so she can leave the city. At the table, she sees Reed and she tries to run, but he catches her. Reed asks Vasa to hear him out and claims that he saw her use magic when she fled on their wedding night and believes that they can help each other. Dominic still doesn't know that she ran away, and Reed wants her to return to keep their alliance. Vasa tells him not to trust Dominic, and he says that he doesn't, but the other Salt Lords want an alliance with him. He tells her that he needs a strong wife that will give him wisdom to win his election, and in exchange, he will tell her how to control her magic before it kills her. Reed says that the black mist is Viraji magic from Moray, and he knows a master of it. He proposes that she act as his wife for 3 years until the election cycle is over and she's mastered her magic. Then he'll give her a legal separation and relocate her wherever she wants. He tells her that she's not a captive, and if she chooses to decline, he'll leave and grant her a divorce. Vasa meets Reed the next morning and agrees to the partnership. Vasa and Reed meet with Cohen, the foreman of Dara, and she learns that Reed and Cohen are as close as brothers. Reed again asks Vasa for her consent on the arrangement and tells her that she needs to convince his people that they're in love. They travel by boat back to Moray, the city of salt, over the large Satara lake. Vasa notes the differences between Moray's warm climate and the snowy mountainous nation of Asteria that she grew up in. When they land, Kasana, Reed's commander of arms, and Mathjan, Reed's advisor, meet them to ride home. As they ride, Vasa is shocked by the sense of community in Moray, so different from the isolation she's used to. Reed brings her to their shared room, and Vasa is frustrated by the sleeping arrangement, so they argue over who gets the bed, and Vasa ultimately ends up on the couch. Reed gives Vasa a letter from her brother, and it asks how she's doing, but Vasa knows he's just checking to see how close the curse is to killing her, in case he needs to come and kill her himself. Reed brings Vasa to meet with Melusina, the High Witch of Viraji and Sitar. Vasa also meets Amelie and Suma, other witches in the coven, and Melusina sends Reed away and then asks Vasa to reveal her magic. She explains that witches are best in covens, and each city, which are referred to as sodalities, in Icaria have their own coven, and the Viraji magic is usually passed down from a mother to an eldest daughter upon her death. Hours later, Amelie teaches Vasa how to direct her magic, and Melusina tells her to come back for daily lessons. Reed brings Vasa to dance in Moray's city center, and Kasana tells her that Melusina is Reed's mother. Back in their room, they argue, and Vasa again warns Reed not to trust her brother. Reed tells her that he'll support and defend her, but not if she's a threat to his country, and asks if she knows what Dominic has planned, but she says no because she's worried he'll throw her out and she won't be able to learn how to control her magic. Vasa begins training with Kasana and continues learning magic from the Viraji Coven and meets 2 other witches, Mariana and Romana. Vasa learns that the Imros witches in Seguth can manipulate metal, the witches of Una can manipulate light, The witches of Zohair and Eru can move the tides, and the witches in Rultho are healers. Melusina brings Vasa to the library and tells her to pick a notebook based on the cover alone and tells her to trust her magic and intuition to guide her. Vasa chooses one and sees that her name is already written inside. Later, Vasa enters the combat rings with Kasana, even though Reed forbade this, and Vasa taps out when she's pinned, but Kasana shallowly cuts her throat and gives her a scar to match the one Vasa gave Reed on their wedding night. Vasa feels her magic building and uses her training to control it. Vasa sees Melusina the next day and refuses to tell her what happened, but then breaks down and asks her to cut the magic from her. Vasa hides and cries under the table, but the witches join her and comfort her by telling her their power all came to them as different vicious animals, but they've shaped it into something better. Vasa reveals that her power is a snake and asks them to teach her. The next day, Reed comes home while Vasa is still sleeping and sees the bruises and bandages and demands to know what happened, but when he sees the cut on her neck, he knows it was Kasana and goes to find her. Vasa runs after him and says that it was her fault, but Reed finds Kasana and demands answers. Kasana tells him everything, and he cuts a matching line on her neck as punishment. Reed says that the punishment for disobeying orders and harming a foreman's consort is dismissal, but Vasa interrupts and tells him that it was her fault and says that her and Kasana are even. Reed accepts the explanation, but he makes an announcement to everyone around, proclaiming that Vasa is his wife and she won't be harmed. Reed asks Vasa to choose a new trainer, and she picks a girl named Asoti and realizes that this is Kasana's wife. Reed brings Vasa home and washes her wounds, and she tells him that she's not like her brother and would never ally with him. She finally reveals that her brother thinks her magic is a curse and plans for her to die here so he can use it as an excuse to invade Icurian lands, and she urges Reed not to bargain with her brother. Reed tells her that it was her mother who arranged the marriage, not her brother, and Dominic actually tried to cancel the arrangement when her mother died. Reed asks her if she wants her brother's throne, and she says no, she just wants to live free. Over the next few weeks, Vasa learns more about magical inheritance and how it differs between covens. Viraji witches only pass their magic through the maternal line, while others can be passed through both. Vasa is interested in the lore of the eastern sodalities, Hazut and Rultho. Hazut's witches are named after the god of peace, Umir, and Rultho's witches are named after Unir, goddess of war. Umir's consort, Zohia, goddess of love and healing, was rumored to be lovers with Unir's consort, Zater, goddess of bargains and souls. Zohia witches can heal, and Zater witches have a dark, deadly magic only accessible through bargains with humans, but they were wiped from Icuria. Melusina tells Vasa that her great-grandmother's name was Freya, and she founded the coven with her own mother, and Freya used to live in Reed's room. Melusina's mother died giving birth, and Freya raised her with her own daughter, Esme. Esme left for Asteria to live a normal life, and after she gave birth to Vasa's mother, she never returned. Vasa's mother, Venna, never knew about the magic and was shocked when she inherited it, and reached out to Melusina 2 years ago to arrange Vasa's marriage to Reed so she could be close to the witches for guidance. Since Melusina's mother died giving birth, she had the power since she was a baby, which should have killed her, but she's now the most powerful Viraji witch in history. Vasa goes home and Reed comes in frazzled because the counselors arrived unannounced, including Gallant of Ergen, Kennen of Seguth, and Mark of Moray. Reed seems to want the approval of Mark because he's his predecessor, having served 2 5-year terms as foreman before becoming counselor. Reed is flustered because Mark came without notice and he didn't have time to plan a formal dinner. Vasa thinks that maybe he didn't want a formal dinner and suggests taking them out to Moray's city center and showing them authenticity. Reed, the counselors, and all of their consorts attend dinner, and Vasa sees that Mark's consort Isabel seemingly wants Reed to receive the other 2 counselors' votes for her own motives, which ends up working in their favor. Neil, the owner of the restaurant, sings Reed's praises and says he kept them in business during the food shortage by brokering deals that lowered taxes and ended up benefiting all territories in Icuria. They start talking of a partnership with Asteria, and Galen says that the creatures in the Lorsiphane Gap make trade difficult, but the Satera Lake remains safe because the creatures can't fit through the narrow passage of the Sanguine River. Mark subtly voices his opinion on the conflict with the Western Territories, and Kennen suggests they save the politics for the morning, and Isabel winks at Vasa from across the table. They go dancing, and Vasa has a moment with Reed. Isabel talks with Vasa and says that she and Mark believe Reed will be a good head man, but it comes down to swinging Saguth and says that when she returns to Murray, she'd like to be friends with her. Reed and Vasa go home, and he tells her that Mark is insisting that Dominic visit again to discuss trade. Vasa is terrified of what he'll do when he sees that her curse is just magic that she's learning to control, and she scolds herself for picturing a life here. Her magic starts to slip, and she runs away so she doesn't hurt Reed, but the magic bursts from her until she's consumed by a black cage. Vasa hears a voice calling to her, and she wakes up in bed with Reed, and she yells at him for sleeping in the bed with her. Reed tells her that Amelie and Melusina were there all night, worried she'd die, and she spent most of the night throwing up, so he stayed by her side so she wouldn't choke on her vomit. Then he yells at her and says he won't accept her, pretending that he's her enemy. Vasa cries, and he hopes she'll open up to him about her brother one day, and thanks her for allowing him to break ground with Mark. Vasa thanks him for his help, and then goes to see Melusina. Vasa apologizes for what happened the night before, and Amelie says she once took down a building with her magic. She was born in Rultho and was meant to marry a man to bring magic to his bloodline, but she was in love with a guard, and when her betrothed found out, she erupted with magic and took down the building. Then Melusina came for her. Amelie also tells Vasa that her mother was poor and she sacrificed herself so Amelie would have a greater opportunity with the magic she inherited. Vasa sees Amelie as a true friend and tells her that there's an ancient Asterian law that allows a woman to ascend the throne with her husband, so if Dominic dies, Reed would be emperor, but she's too scared to tell Reed. Her brother thinks she's dying, but she's afraid of what will happen when he finds out she isn't, and Amelie promises not to tell a soul, and offers to help convince her brother that she is dying so he doesn't harm her or Reed. Dominic arrives 2 weeks later with her father's old advisor, Ozic, and Vasa tells Reed's advisor, Mathgen, that she doesn't believe they would attack Murray because it would be too expensive without an exit plan, and their true assault will likely be slow and drawn out. They all meet for negotiations, and Dominic asks for Reed to remove troops from Rultho and Hazut and allow them safe passage to the Fang for trade routes. Then Dominic and Ozic ask to speak with Vasa alone. Vasa meets with them, and Ozic reveals that he knows what happened on her wedding night. Ozic says she wouldn't have come back unless Reed offered her something, and she reveals that he'll give her a divorce after 3 years. Ozic tells Dominic that he must offer her something better because she knows he sent her there to die. Dominic tells Vasa to get Reed elected and allow them to establish trade so he can then invade Icaria and kill Reed. Then Vasa will be allowed to live if she promises to never marry again. She goes to drink her wine and smells that it's been poisoned, and Dominic says that he was just testing her. They misjudge her and think that her loyalties only lie with herself, and they also don't know about Icaria's magic, ships, and army. Vasa immediately tells Reed that their attempt to trade is only a ruse to clear a path to Murray, and tells him of Dominic's offer. Reed says it's a better offer, and Vasa says that it isn't a real one, and he'll ensure that she dies in the battle, and she tells him that her wine was poisoned. Reed threatens to kill Dominic, but Vasa says that they're smarter than her brother, and finally reveals that together they have claim to the Asterian throne, but she assures him that she doesn't want it. Reed asks if she was afraid that he would rescind their deal to separate if she told him this information sooner, and she says yes, but now she believes he deserves the throne. Reed asks why she would do this for him, and she tells him that years ago she loved a man named Roman, and Dominic had him killed. Vasa tells him that she's afraid Dominic will kill him if she gets too close to him, but Reed says that he isn't scared, and they finally share the bed. Reed brings Vasa to meet the Salt Lords, and a few weeks later she receives her first letter from Dominic, but doesn't see anything out of the ordinary when she reviews it with Mathgen. Vasa and Reed discuss the conflict between Asteria and the western sodality of Rultho. Many believe that Tan of Rultho started the violence, but Vasa says that it was really her father. He purposefully built the dam on the Sanguine River, and the foreman of Rultho sent advisors to negotiate for peace without telling the headman, and her father agreed to remove the dam peacefully, but when Rultho sent workmen to remove it, her father killed them all, and Rultho was blamed for starting the attack. Isabel, Mark, Reed, Vasa, Amelie, and the rest of the coven board the ship headed to Rultho. During their journey, Rultho soldiers attack their boat, but Vasa hears one of them speaking in Asterian. Melusina transforms her magic into a huge horse to attack the soldiers in the water, and when Vasa sees Kasana alone, she knows Reed is in trouble, and they run to look for him. They find Reed in a room tied up with rope that dulls magic, and Vasa and Kasana kill the soldiers but leave the general alive for questioning, and Vasa sees that it's her cousin, Inyak Khazar. Vasa doesn't get any useful information from Inyak, and she asks Reed why he went off alone, and he says that he was looking for her. Vasa starts to lose control of her magic and tells Reed to leave, but he stays and calms her, and they end up having an intimate moment. They arrive, and Vasa meets Headman Kier with Reed, and he introduces her to Tan of Rultho, who she's already met when she transcribed for her father. Tan is cold and says that he doesn't trust anyone from Asteria, but Vasa tells him of the Asterian men in Rultho uniforms that attacked them, and gifts him the general who was the only one kept alive. Melusina introduces Vasa to Elijah, the High Consort, and he jokes that Vasa will soon be taking his place. Cohen of Dara introduces himself to Amelie and asks her to dance, and Tan, Amelie's former fiancé, looks shocked to see her. Vasa attends a tournament that Reed is fighting in, and he's matched with the foreman of Rultho since they're the top contenders for Headman. Right before Reed and Tan's fight, Inyak is brought out in chains and put on a platform above them. The fight starts, but then an oily black magic with a rotten smell starts moving along the Colosseum and people flee. Vasa runs for Reed, and the oil turns into a creature that attacks Inyak and kills him, leaving him looking drained with an oily black magic left behind. Vasa remembers finding her mom dead with the same smell and oily black residue, and realizes that her mother did not succumb to her magic. She was actually killed by this same creature, and she remembers smelling that same smell on Dominic a while back. The city is locked down, and the Viraji Coven meets with Leanne and Day, the High Witch of Una, and her coven. Brielle says that the creature sounds like a Mirodag, a demon-like henchman from the Sater witches, who are long extinct. Sater witches get their magic from the god of bargains and can't be willed without a trade, so someone is making the bargains and someone else is using the magic. They suspect Tan because his men have talked about him acting suspicious lately, but it doesn't seem to make sense. Vasa researches Sater magic and believes that Dominic is somehow behind the creature, and her and Amelie get in a bit of an argument because she lashes out at her because of stress. Vasa and Reed have a tense conversation with Tan in the gallery because he doesn't trust Vasa. Reed suggests that Tan move his forces east and ready to strike against Asteria, then take down the dam when they succeed. He offers ships from Saguth and more jobs for his people if he supports Reed as headman, and Tan questions Vasa's loyalties to her own people. Vasa says she's a descendant of one of the most powerful Viraji witches, and she isn't abandoning her country, she's come to her true home. She assures Tan that she just translated words and had nothing to do with the outcome of the treaty with Asteria in the past, and he finally agrees to support him. Reed returns to their room and sees her journal and reveals that he bought it months ago and is shocked that she chose it over all of the other ones. He tells her that he wants to renegotiate their deal and wants her to stay for longer than 3 years for political reasons, but also because he loves her. Vasa tells him that she loves him too, and they sleep together. At a ceremony, Melusina tells Vasa that Amelie still hasn't come around since their fight, and Vasa goes to find her, but she's drugged and captured, then wakes up in the catacombs with the magic nullifying ropes around her wrists. She sees Amelie tied up across from her, and Mathgen approaches and says that he can't let an Asterian be crowned as High Consort and ruin his country. His family was killed by Asterians, and Mark of Moray refused to go to war over it. He tells her that she'll write a letter to her brother telling him the exact route Rultho will take. He'll have the letter intercepted by Tan's men, Reed will lose as head man, and they'll start a war with Asteria, which is exactly what he wants. Dominic arrives in the chamber with him, and Vasa realizes Mathgen, Dominic, and Tan have all been working together. Reed is worried that Vasa hasn't come back, and Melusina says something must be wrong, and they split up to look for her. Mathgen appears and offers to go with Reed for protection, but he luckily brushes him off. Hours later, the witches from all sodalities are working together to sense Vasa's life force, and Reed is distraught but questions if Vasa ran away, and Melusina says that Vasa would never put Amelie in danger. Vasa asks Mathgen what he did, and Dominic says he made a deal with Mathgen to give him Inyak Khazar, the general that killed his family, in exchange for Vasa. Dominic says if she doesn't write the letter, he'll carve another cut into Amelie's face. Vasa writes the letter and Mathgen leaves, then Vasa confronts Dominic about killing their mother, but he denies this. As he's about to kill Vasa, magic erupts and Melusina arrives, making Dominic drop his blade. Vasa cuts herself free and her magic takes shape as a wolf and kills Dominic. Then Vasa tells Melusina that Dominic wasn't working alone. Reed and the other counselors meet to vote on head man, but someone hands a letter to Tan and he announces that it's an intercepted letter from Vasa. Mathgen translates it and Reed thinks she's betrayed him, but catches the last line that says, "I told you I would play for you, and I have," and he points his blade at Tan and asks where his wife is. Melusina, Vasa, and Amelie arrive with Dominic's head, and Vasa says Mathgen is next. Vasa sends her magic wolf towards Mathgen, but he pulls Reed in front of him as Rultho soldiers come in and attack. Kier yells that it's a coup, and Reed kills Tan as the witches arrive to fight back. Reed commands Kier's soldiers to protect the witches and fight Rultho's men. Vasa goes after Mathgen and tells Reed what he did. Mathgen confirms and says Reed will understand why he did it one day, and then Reed kills him. The Mirodeg suddenly appears right behind Reed as Ozic steps out and commands the demon with his Eterra magic. Ozic reveals that he bargained with Vasa's mother and killed her father to take his wife and his throne, but Vasa's mother made her own plans to send Vasa to Marae to learn magic and protect her from Ozic and her brother, so she broke the bargain to give both of her kids their birthright and died for it. The Mirodeg stabs a claw through Reed's heart, and Vasa runs to him, then feels him die. Ozic tells Vasa that he'll bring Reed back if she forfeits her magic in a bargain for his life, and she agrees. Reed comes back to life, but then Vasa is captured by soldiers, and Ozic escorts her out, presumably back to Asteria. Reed wakes up, and Melusina tells Reed what happened and says Amelie went after Vasa. Reed says that he's going after her too, but Melusina says that he was elected as headman while he slept for a week. Melusina says that the goddess Viraji spoke to her directly and told her that Vasa was in the catacombs, but she hasn't heard her speak since. She believes that Viraji is going to right an ancient wrong that was committed long ago. Reed reminds his mother that Dominic is dead, which now makes him Emperor of Asteria, and he says that he's going to get his wife. So that is where Book 1 ends. Again, Book 2, The Wicked and the Damned, comes out on February 24th. And as always, if there are any other books that you would like me to summarize, please just leave me a comment, and thanks for watching.